Remember that we all are brothers.
Remember that we all are brothers.
All people.
All people.
And beasts and trees.
And beasts and trees.
And stone and wind.
And stone and wind.
We all descend from the one great being.
We all descend from the one great being.
That was always there.
That was always there.
Before people lived and named it.
Before people lived and named it.
Before the first seeds sprouted.
Before the first seeds sprouted.
Hi, Alexa.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Good. Why don't you take a second, introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. I'm Alexa Silvaggio. I'm super grateful to be talking to my dear brother, Scott Kaufman. I am a coach. I'm a guide. I'm a mindfulness teacher. I'm currently in graduate school studying to be a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. I am a real estate mogul and an investor and a sister to Scott.
Yeah, you are all of those things and so much more. I remember when I met you, you were really focused on yoga and body positivity for women, and your ability to reinvent yourself has really been an inspiration to a lot of people in our world, and I'm sure in your world. You know, to see the transition that you've made, and we've talked about, you know, when we first met, there was a lot that really was spilling out, and now it's really kind of incredible to see how you've changed that narrative. And I'd like to talk about what you do differently, and what changed in you.
Yeah. A lot changed in me, and it's still evolving and changing. And, you know, it's like, I used to think that there would be this point in life where it's like you did enough work and then you like kind of coasted, like you did it and you like looked at your shit enough. And then you were like, I'm good. I can go live my life now. And I think a huge part of my transformation was actually realizing that this is our life. The life is happening right now. It doesn't begin once some other thing happens, once we get to the place we want to be, or once we like get to the body that we want, or once we get to the certain amount of money. Like, this is it. You know, it all comes back to that truth of like, presence is really the thing. Mm-hmm. And it was ironic because I was teaching yoga and meditation and mindfulness, and I was a gifted teacher in many ways, and I have that ability to teach, but it wasn't quite integrating, and it wasn't quite integrated. And what really shifted for me on many levels was, of course, psychedelic work, and then working and being around people like you and your wife, who held a loving and yet fierce mirror to me to allow me to continue to see myself more clearly, and call me on my bullshit, mm-hmm. in a loving way. No brutality here. It was loving.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I mean, let's be clear. You used to come to our house and do psychedelic journeys, and then wake up at 6 a.m. and teach 4 yoga classes with your eyes rolled back in your head. And, you know,
after staying up all night.
Right. And while it's commendable, it was like, where do you fit into this? And I think that, you know, from my perspective in watching your growth, it's that you began to value yourself in a different way and to put yourself more at the front of the line. Do you feel like that's accurate?
Totally accurate. Yeah. I talk about this a bit on Instagram and social media, and it's like the through lines are always the same. And it was a transition for me in like the place in which I was doing things from. So instead of doing things for love, doing things from a place of love, mm-hmm. you know, allowing myself to be so full that like the doing wasn't coming from a place of like scarcity and like, oh my God, please like me, please love me. It was like, no, I actually want to cook you dinner. Actually, that makes me feel good. Not like I have to cook you dinner or I'm afraid you won't like me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a really big shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people's work is that paradigm of from love rather than being for love. I think I see a lot of people doing things in the world so that they can be validated. And while validation is a huge part of being a human, when you depend on that validation, it can always be taken away from you, and so you are operating from fear. And you very clearly stopped operating from fear. I think a lot of it came when you met Alex, when you were being
Yeah.
seen really for who you are versus kind of this persona that just wasn't totally authentic. While it was true to who you are very generous. That is very much who you are. But definitely there was a big shift.
Huge. Yeah, it was such a new dynamic for me to be in partnership. It was actually, if I'm being totally honest, and I've said this to Alex, so no secret here, it was deeply uncomfortable at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
to be in partnership with somebody who really saw me and was totally and utterly available to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about what they could get. It was like about how they could show up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt kind of like eating my own shoe at the beginning. Like I wanted to throw it out. You know,
Really?
there was a level of like, yeah, the first like 2 months, like deeply uncomfortable. I was like, this can't be it. Because there was a part of me that like very much knew that it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so my ego was like going off, like no, this can't be it. This is gross. He's gross. He's not it. He's gross. And it was like, no, actually he just is showing up and he loves you.
I mean, look,
but it took a second.
I kind of felt that with Deanna. You know, I was coming out of a toxic relationship, and here's this magical woman who was also coming out of something that was unhealthy, and so there was a lot of poking around at each other to see how real it was. I remember going on a date with Deanna really early on, and she was trying to talk me out of loving her. She was like, "You don't even know really who I am. Like you're not going to love me when you know who I am." And I'm like, "You can try to talk me out of this, but it's just not going to happen."
Right.
I think another huge, maybe the biggest shift, even bigger than Alex, was when your mom died.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how that affected your identity, both when she was alive and struggling, and then when she did die? Because there was a change in your mindset, but there was a change in physically how you look, and like it was fast. What was happening there?
You were so instrumental around that time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I often say that like my mom was truly a unique individual. Like she ate meritocracy for breakfast. Like it was like about what she could do and what she could achieve and like how she could show for it. And like that was like she had this desire to like take life and like push through it and like move. And it came from like a tremendous amount of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And she believed in something called the power of good. She called it the power of good.
Mm-hmm.
And she lived by that. And it was this motto of encouragement that like she would meet people and like find where they felt like maybe they weren't fully secure, and she would like bolster them there. Like I saw her do it time and time again as a dance teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like you may not be the best student, but like she would encourage you to be better. And she was really a profound teacher for people because of that encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And because it validated her so much financially to be this person that exuded just like pure support to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
it proliferated into her life, to like all of her friendships. Like there wasn't just like a friendship where there was a ton of authenticity or mutual support. It was like all of her vectors were pointing out all the time. She was unsupportable until she got sick. And when she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, that was like the thing that broke her heart but fixed her vision. And she was able to start to peel off some of the layers of the masks, not to everybody, to maybe like 6 people, of which you were one. Literally, like very few people really saw my mother. And like I would say, like Daniel Sharman was one, like you were one. I was lucky. I think I'm the only one in my family who actually really like saw her. And like the layers started to peel back because it was all slipping away, right? Like life itself was slipping away. And it was like she had this little like engine inside of her that like just wouldn't stop. It just wouldn't stop. And it honestly didn't stop until about 2 days before she died, because it was stopping.
Right.
And I got to witness her through this transformation, and through her getting to know herself more exquisitely, and through her taking off the layers and peeling back the masks and pulling back the layers of the onion, and getting to know her heart and getting to know the people in her life in even just a smidgen of a more authentic way. And she told me before she died, she said, without this experience of the journey work that we've done together, of the self-exploration, like her life would have just been suffering. And she was very, very clear on that. And I really took on the role of her teacher and her guide and her caretaker. And that took up so much space in my life that there was really no spaciousness for intimacy. There was no spaciousness for femininity. There was no spaciousness for receptivity. And it peaked the last year of her life. It was COVID. It was 2020. She died November 27th of 2020. And in early 2020, as we know, everything shut down. And I was living I was single, and I had a cute little French bulldog named Hugo. I didn't have kids. It was like, who was going to go take care of her? Like the single chick, like, okay, cool. I'm going to go move in with my mom because she had stage 4 ovarian cancer, which, for those of you who aren't very familiar with this disease, which I hope you're not, the ovarian cells weep, like they expel fluid, they cry.
Really?
And so she started getting fluid in her lungs, and the lungs had to be drained every 3 days. So she had a tube in each lung.
Oh, wow.
I had to drain every 3 days. Yeah. She had that for the last like 3 years of her life. No baths, no getting in the ocean. Like there was a day where it was like, you cannot ever go in water again. She would like bird bath herself. That was like all she could do. And so it was tough because it was COVID, and we didn't really know like how serious it was yet. But what we did know was my mom was actively dying, and like having a person coming and going with her immune system, she would have gotten COVID and not made it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to move in with her. And I quarantined for 10 days, drove up there in one shot, like no stopping, because it was the beginning. We didn't really know what was happening. Moved in. And that last year, like everything was just so, so intense. Like it turned up the volume on my caretaking. It turned up the volume on my codependency. It turned up the volume on my overfunctioning and my overworking and my overdoing. Like I was living with her, and I was teaching like 5 yoga classes a day on Zoom, and like cooking for this woman, draining her lungs, cleaning the house. Like it was just full bore. And then 5 yoga classes a day, pretty much, which people depended on because everything was closed. And people would kind of refer to it as like church. Like it was like church yoga. Like I was going to give some sort of a dharma, and they were there, and it was like people were struggling. So I felt this like, not only am I taking care of my mother, I have to take care of all my students. Like it was like this like big version. And you know how it is, like before you go to a journey, like the week before, and like all your shit comes up.
Of course.
It was that. It was like the last year of like all my shit building and building and building. And it was so intense.
Mm-hmm.
And when my mother died, it died with her in a lot of ways. And a couple days before my mother died, I actually wrote her a letter. I obviously never shared it with her, but I know a part of her knew. And I wrote her a letter with all the things that I wanted to die with her, that I wanted to like cut the cord of. And all of those things were on the list, right? This overfunctioning and this drive to be like proven, like approved of, and to prove myself. And I wanted my lack of femininity to die, and I wanted my scarcity to die. And I put it in the letter, and 2 days later she died. And I was with her the moment of her death. We had been, she had been, it was her choice. This was not like me being like, you should do this. She wanted to microdose her way out. And she was microdosing psilocybin. And she had quite possibly the most exquisite departure of the body that I certainly have ever heard of. And I'm biased. She was my mother. But for the last 7 days of her life, everyone came to her house, and she got to like one by one sit with everyone and have completion, and like tell them what she needed them to know. You know, she told my dad that he was like the worst thing that ever happened to her. Yeah, it was like fucked up, but also amazing. And she told him that he was one of her greatest teachers, and that she loved him very much. You know, it was all of that. It was all of these conversations. And, you know, that's the one detail I'll share. There were many that were uncomfortable and great. And she just got to, she got her completion. And there's this website, I don't remember what it's called, Tribute. And we knew she was about to die, and we posted on Facebook this website. If anyone who's going through a big life event, whether it's dying, whether it's giving birth, whether it's whatever, everyone can like submit a video, and it'll like edit everyone's little minute long video into like a
montage.
A montage.
Right.
And it was like an hour and a half video. And everyone who wanted to say their goodbye to her got to say their goodbye. And the day that she passed, it was the day after Thanksgiving. And again, like my caretaking, of course, because I'm like, my mom's dying, it's Thanksgiving. I don't want Thanksgiving to be the worst Thanksgiving ever. So I of course, cooked like a full fucking Thanksgiving meal for like the hospice nurses and my family, and like went psychotic. And it was the day after Thanksgiving. I'm exhausted. I wake up at 6 a.m. because I'm going to teach your wife via Zoom.
Were you teaching her, or were you guys in a session?
I was teaching her. We both were teaching each other. So she was my coach, and I was her private yoga instructor at the time. And so I walk into the room. It's like 6:30 a.m. into her room, and she's asleep. She's very much asleep. And I kind of want to back up. My mother said that that if there were ever a day that she couldn't walk, she didn't want to be alive anymore. And there was never a day that she was not able to walk or eat or talk or anything, except for this day. And it was 6:30 a.m. I walk into the room, and she's asleep, and the hospice nurse is in there, and the hospice really was amazing. And they said, her breathing really changed around 2 a.m. I think this is going to be her last day. So I went out and I sent everyone a message like, hey, if you are wanting, like my aunt wasn't there because it was Thanksgiving. She had gone home. Like, if you want to come back, this is probably her last day. I go into my designated yoga room and turn on my Zoom, and Deanna's there, and we just are sharing a little bit before class. And like, I always check in with people like, hey, Dee, like, what do you need? What do you want today? Like physically, mentally, emotionally, what are you working through? Mm-hmm. And she gave me the lowdown, and all of a sudden I get a phone call from the hospice nurse next door. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hold on, like the hospice nurse is calling me. And I answer, and her name was Glory, like Gloria, but Glory. And she said, your mother's about to take her last breath. And Deanna just sits there and she goes, please just go. And I said, of course. I go in there, and I had her bedroom. She had like a waterfall in her bedroom. She was kind of a baller. And I had like lit the room with these candles. It was so exquisite. It was like a full on like a spiritual center. It was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And candles everywhere. And I had journey music playing, and the song Purnamida was on. You've heard it a million times. If you don't know it, go to Spotify, check it out. It's called Purnamida. I know all the words. It's in Sanskrit. And I just run to her and I hold her and I just tell her, Mom, I love you so much. It's so safe to go. It's so safe to go. I'm right here with you. And I sing the song. And the song, it comes at the verse, it goes, Purnamida, 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 Om. And I sang the word Om, and she died.
Wow.
And a few days before that, we had been reading a really powerful book. If you haven't read it, please get your hands on it. I wish I had it to like do a little Vanna White moment. The Proof of Heaven by Dr. Eben Alexander. It was,
I've read it.
Yeah, it's pretty lit.
Yeah.
It's a
well,
yes
it's wild. It's wild that it's coming from like a neurosurgeon. Like a neurosurgeon. And it's like the most connected woo. And he's talking about like being dead from a clinical perspective. And it was funny because he got to death by having meningitis, which is actually how my dad died. So it really struck a chord when he started telling the story of how he got meningitis, and he's just like, losing it. And then somehow he came back, which is nuts, but go ahead.
He was dead for like a couple days too. Like it was not casual. Like he had no neocortex online for like 3 days. Like he shouldn't have had any memory. He shouldn't have had any, he should have been gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly as Scott said, it's from a clinical perspective, which is he was an atheist and like didn't believe it. He was like, science, that's it. This is, you die, you're done. And he talks about in the book how the sound of heaven is Om. And that's the sound that he heard as he was ascending was Om. And I sang Purnamida, 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 Om. And she passed away. And we had just read that part of the book like a few days before. And she passed away. It was terrible. And there was also relief because I had been going so hard. And I'll spare you the details of that. But a few weeks later, I'm back in Los Angeles and I've moved into a new place. I'm there and I'm meditating, and Spotify is just doing its thing, and Purnamida comes on. And I finished my meditation and I'm like, what? I don't even know what that means. Like Purnamida, what does that mean? So I Google it, and Purnamida in Sanskrit means completion.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Purnamida, completion, 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 Om.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, there was, I have a pretty crazy story. I mean, we have a pretty crazy story about your mom. Accidentally. We got a few crazy stories about your mom. We got the one about the time she accidentally ate 2 mushroom chocolates and took herself to the movies.
5 grams.
and then showed up. And then we just so happened to be having a ceremony that night, and she Ubers her way
Oh my God.
over, and then proceeds to, while I'm caring for her, she was basically, I mean, 30% alive at this point. And she proceeds to, while I'm caring for her, sit up, and then, not even from her, channeling from somewhere else, telling me, I think Deanna was not journeying that night because we were thinking she might be pregnant. There was a few journeys in a row where some crazy shit happened when she wasn't in ceremony, and your mom, basically from laying down and not being able to move, sits up fully erect like she's a 20-year-old woman and begins to speak to me from sort of this divine mother place. And I'm as much as I act as a spiritual guide for people, I'm not really all that woo woo. And she's telling me, you're going to have a daughter. She's going to be perfect. You're doing great. Don't listen to anybody that's telling you otherwise. And you were sitting there, and we were both kind of jaws on the floor, like, what the hell's happening right now? And then, of course, there was the time after she died when we went up to, when we went up to watch the Nutcracker that was kind of sponsored by her in post-mortem, and proceeded to eat a bunch of sass while your dad was making maybe the largest meat dinner
out.
maybe ever, and you and Deanna end up, Deanna's codependence has her eating this meat, which is the worst experience of her life. And then you and her end up in the bathroom, like laugh crying. It was a really sweet moment, albeit deeply uncomfortable.
Deeply. That was deeply depressing.
Well, and also to be fair, your dad's house like had a Civil War reenactment on the
Yeah.
like the ceiling, like the ring around the ceiling had a Civil War. Like, it was like maybe the worst place you could ever have that experience.
Ever. It was after a memoriam with like 20 pounds of cow meat on the table. It was so gross.
It was so gross. And your brother was there just like slamming cigarettes, like
Slamming. Yeah, that was a dark day. Oh my God. Yeah, we've done some things, Scott.
I
We've done
mean,
some things.
yeah. And it's, it's wild to see, as you've moved out of struggle and I've moved out of struggle, for in a large degree, I tend to fall back into it.
Same.
I think it's, it's the humanness of our experience. But as you've moved into this new iteration of you, where you are supported, you're always supported, but I just don't know that you felt it. I think you felt very alone, very much alone. And your identity was being this caretaker for your mother. And when that was taken out of the equation, I'd love for you to speak to, as you embrace the new role of being loved and cared for and not resistant to it. And, I know you've had some great friends and some great people that have been in your corner for all this time. And yet you appeared to really be rowing the boat all by yourself. Oh, how was it? Was it the space of her not occupying all of it?
Totally. It was the space, and it was my willingness to sit in the discomfort of the holy shift, and to be willing to allow people to move toward me, and to trust. The trust piece is still really huge, like the moving from fear to love takes audacious amounts of trust, because there's that control piece, like, oh, if I can just kind of hold it all together and like do it like this, where I know what's going to happen, then I can't get like totally slammed by life, which is just not accurate. And so to be able to like open palm my life instead, like just like open palm it, like when it comes, let it in, and like when it goes, let it, because that's all life is comings and goings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the spaciousness though was huge. There was just no room. I was like, everything was going in that direction, in her direction.
But you had some sort of romantic relationships during the time that she was sick, albeit they were fairly toxic. How did that live in you, making time to create even more struggle for yourself?
Yeah, it was impressive, right? Yeah, I was, well, I think it was just a matter of beating the vulnerability to the punch, because I was aware enough to know that I was choosing unavailable people. And so if they couldn't choose me, it wasn't my fault. It was just that they were unavailable.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like being mutually met by somebody and then getting rocked. You know, where we were both mutually invested and like committed and present with each other. It was much easier for me. Look, it was also like, it was a distraction, actually. Like the nameless ones, who you've seen them all, like they were just really good distractions from actually feeling the discomfort of knowing that my mother was going to die. So all of my attention was either on helping my mother and trying to save her in essence, which is of course impossible, but trying to find like the best, every type of doctor you could find and like guiding her. When I wasn't doing that, I was like checked out. And my way of checking out was by finding these like very gregarious, funny, captivating party animals who couldn't choose me, because then I was constantly chasing. And if I was just constantly chasing, I didn't have to sit with the inevitable sensation of sorrow. You know, it's like, it could have been a treat, but it was a treatment. It was a treatment for the shit I didn't want to feel.
And then, so you stopped teaching yoga 28 times a day.
Yeah.
And I think that was from my perspective in watching you, there was a level of self-care in you doing that. There was something that it was filling you up in some way. How did you replace that piece? Like the movement piece, you're a very active, if not hyperactive person. And strangely, not all that ADD, but still hyperactive. Like you can focus on some shit. But
For sure.
what did you replace that constant motion with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I put all my energy into building Ritch. You know, I had a chocolate business for almost 5 years. And that was a really delightful thing to cultivate, because it was like, I was very clear at the time that I didn't want to be the product anymore. That like, I wanted a physical product that would teach what I wanted to teach, but in something that would make me not run around. And so it took a ton of focus and a ton of energy to build that brand. And yeah, I think just, it was like the energy was just focused in a different way. It went from physical movement to like brain movement and emotional movement and commitment. And building a business is, it's no joke. Like it's a lot of work. We were sold everywhere from Goop to Erewhon to what have you. We ended up doing a partnership with Kate Walsh, who is a famous actress, and she ended up taking over. She still sells the chocolate on her website. And it was wonderful until I really realized that the message wasn't really getting across, right? The whole thing with Ritch was that it was about cultivating a more loving relationship to our body and to food, because that was my mess and I wanted to make it a message. And so if we could get really rich with presence, we could actually like taste our food and enjoy it. And so the back of each chocolate bar had a QR code that led to a breathwork ritual that could get you really embodied so that you could really taste your food. I spent many years having a deeply dysfunctional relationship with food. So I wanted to just help kind of usher people into a more loving environment around food. But no one gave a fuck about that. People just wanted chocolate, you know, like I could see how many people like actually scanned the QR code. We sold like so many bars of chocolate and like maybe like 1% actually scanned the QR code and like did the ritual.
I mean, it's hard to get people to do shit.
It's so hard to get people to do shit. And it's hard to get ourselves to do shit when we really want to do it. So trying to get other people, you taught me that. You were like, good luck trying to change anybody else. It's hard to change yourself, motherfucker. So I was like I need to stop trying to make other things the product. Like people like what I have to say sometimes, not all the time, but like the people who follow me on Instagram or TikTok, like they're into it. I'm like, why am I trying to make this chocolate bar the thing? And I'm not really like, I don't really identify as an eating disorder person anymore. So I was like, that's like a past iteration. Like if people want to heal their relationship to their body, it'll be through my teachings. It won't be through a chocolate bar.
Well, let's talk about the eating stuff. So you were incredibly anorexic for a long time, for many years. And also it was during a time that you were like a world-class dancer and it was, I mean, I mean, look, you say, they say a cat has 9 lives, you know, you're like 3 cats. How is managing that, like, because you can't have a lot of energy when you're anorexic. Like, can you?
It's like pure adrenaline. You're just so fucked up, you know, like it's a pretty sick psychological disorder. Like you'll just push. You're not as good as you could be if you were eating, but like you'll just push through it. Like I remember taking a dance class. I mean, I took many dance classes, but I remember one specific dance class where I was like really struggling. And I just remember like trying to do something and like my body just wouldn't do it. I think I like ate cauliflower afterwards. I was like, I need some cauliflower. like not a sandwich, like cauliflower. Yeah, I was pretty unwell for a number of years. And it was so fucked up because I remember like going to see therapists about it. And they were so disintegrated and so like off the mark, and they were supposed to be like eating disorder specialists, and they would like just talk to me about food. Like, be like, what do you eat? What do you eat today? I'm like, dude, the food is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. Like, can you talk to me about my trauma instead? Like, can we talk about the actual thing that's causing this? Like no one actually, there are so many terrible therapists and so many terrible coaches in the world. Like it blew my mind. I was like, what is happening? Like in retrospect, especially now that like I'm in school to be a therapist and like I've worked with coaches like you and your wife and like Jamie and all the, you know, I'm just like, how are people so daft? But it took a long time to get out of that hole. Like it was a deep, dark hole.
It is crazy how many people call themselves a coach or a guide and they're not doing their own work. Like a lot of what I've learned, especially for men, is that discipline equals freedom, and creating
That
challenge, like real challenge. Like I go, so every morning I go into a sauna at like 200 and something degrees until I'm until I'm really struggling. And then I go jump in a cold plunge at like 39 degrees. And then I go back. And then I go back. And there's something about putting myself in the line of real struggle, like real challenge that I don't want to do. I mean, if anybody tells you that they want to they want to jump in a cold plunge, they're probably lying. It's not. It's really about, for me, a shout out to Plunge and Redwood Outdoors, because those. Meanwhile, my landlord is so pissed at me for the sauna. He just sent me a letter. But whatever, it had to happen.
Figure it out.
I didn't figure it out. But having something that's so actually difficult that I'm trying to talk myself out of. I wake up in the morning, and half the days I take my daughter to school, and so I have like an hour, because meanwhile she goes to school like 4 miles from here, but I live in LA, so it's an hour, and that there and back. And I have an hour to let this dialogue try to take me down. And
yeah,
I then get home, and it's about, that voice, that complainer, the bitch, the me always winning. Because what I've realized is that self-trust is the baseline for self-confidence. And if I trust myself to win that battle every day, to force myself to do what's good for me, because I do a lot of shit that's not good for me. I mean, I eat sugar, and I don't drink anymore, but I did for a long time, and it wasn't good. And I like to have fun as much as the next guy. Mm-hmm. I get addicted to, I could get addicted to anything. I just have that gear. Really? Yeah. And so, but the addiction of me challenging myself and then meeting that, has created this amount of self-trust, which has led to this self-confidence, which, has got me to a place where I feel comfortable starting a podcast and putting myself out there and risking failure and coaching people and feeling really good about creating structure and challenge for people so that they can learn to win at life. And learning to win at life is a muscle. And you doing these yoga classes that you were doing was getting people to win, and getting people to win makes them trust themselves, and it makes them feel good, and it makes them have confidence. And so, I really appreciate how much care you've put in. Like, you put a lot of care into the way that you live your life. And I think that that's a real model for people. And so I just got to tell you that I appreciate watching, and your TikToks, and I don't watch TikTok, but your Instagrams, and
same.
Yeah. I mean, it's that is a trap that you talk about addiction. You get stuck down that rabbit hole, you might never come out.
I have a limit on my phone for a reason.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Social media is a weird thing. Like, look, I'm deeply addicted to my phone. I admit it, completely. And I get into a lot of conflict with Deanna because, it keeps me out of presence, and she's right. But I'll fight for it. But totally. like Twitter is like a cesspool. You go on Twitter, and it's either people saying, it's crazy, and it's so easy.
Sticky. It's sticky.
It's so sticky.
Yeah.
I think Twitter is stickier than Instagram.
Yeah. Well, it's just such little perfect sound bites of chaos.
Yeah. And it's weird. Like the worse the complaint, the more people align themselves with it. And it's, the social media thing is, it is ending up being quite a problem for the youth, for sure. The echo chambers.
What do you think is, just like witnessing the generation, and this is not like, because I don't know what's going to fucking happen, but like just witnessing like these kids who have known nothing but iPads since age 2.
Mm.
Like, what are we looking at? It's, and maybe this is my own stuff around, because like when I was a kid, I had to sit at the fucking dinner table and like listen to whoever was in front of me, like no matter what. And now no one has to do that. We're all just like, so I can't imagine it being really great. But what do you think?
Well, I think that there's some good with the iPad in that it's hard. Parenting's not easy, and having having the iPad for small amounts of time to give the parent a break, I think is valuable. Putting interesting, not mindless, but like constructive things for kids to play with is fine. Once it gets into sort of the vapid validation stuff, I think it's dangerous. I think we would be silly to not know that it's dangerous, to not know that when validation, like we've talked about, when validation becomes the drug, it can always be taken away from you. And I have a client and a friend who's a reality TV guy, and I mean, this guy just gets crushed in the media, and it hurts. It hurts, and you get stuck on the social media. You get stuck chasing likes. You get stuck chasing comments. It's dangerous. There's no question it's dangerous.
No doubt.
And not being physically active and not having an interest in being physically active because you can be entertained by, it's the difference of creating your entertainment, creating what occupies your time and being occupied. It's not that different from, my generation that had the television, that we would come home from school, and or Saturday morning, you just sit there and watch cartoons and just be checked out.
Right.
Well, you're learning how to check out. You're learning how to not create for yourself. You're learning how to not be creative. You're learning how to, you stop giving a shit.
Yeah. Apathy. And it's like the culture of compare to spare.
Yeah.
Like we had a bunch of kids over. We had a sleepover with like 5 children a couple weeks ago. God bless us. And, dude, it was so nice.
And you survived.
And I lived. My heart is still in my chest. And one of the kids said, "Oh, I want to follow you on TikTok." And he found me on TikTok, and I don't have like a crazy following, but I have like 50,000 followers.
It's a pretty big following.
He was like, "Oh, you have like a following. Come be in my video." And all of a sudden, this like 10-year-old kid is like trying to get me in all of his videos because he wants more likes.
Yeah.
And he's fucking 10, and it's like, that's the goal. It's not like, oh, let me create something meaningful or like do something. Right? It's like the industry of cool, like who can look the hottest or like put out the most funny thing, which is like, there's merit to humor. There's merit to beauty, but it's like the intention underneath it is not like, oh, I'm creating this because this feels right to me or feels authentic or it feels good. It's like, I'm creating this because otherwise I'm not valid.
Yeah. I mean, there is that. And also for a lot of these kids, it's a business.
Yeah.
You see, but then you see kids who become these influencers and one misstep and everything's gone. Everything's taken away. And then they're, stuck in a world. I read about an influencer and there was, he had created like an empire, like a real empire. And there was an accident on one of the shoots or something, and it basically ruined him. And I mean, he was big, ruined him. There's, there's a lot of risk when you bet the house on that. And there's,
it's there's a really beautiful influencer, or there was a really beautiful influencer named Elise Myers, who created just like the most entertaining, like vulnerable content. Like she would tell stories from her life, and they were always hilarious, but it was like deeply exposing. And she would share meaningful content too. She was like the influencer that you want. She had millions and millions of followers on TikTok, and she'd get like hundreds of thousands of comments on these videos.
Wow.
And people would pressure her to talk about certain things because they felt that she needed to be talking about what they wanted her to be talking about. In particular, it was the Israel-Palestine war. And her son, who is not even a year old, needed open heart surgery. She was like sharing about that. And on this post about her sharing about like what she was going through, which is terrifying, like she was bullied so intensely that she just was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't share my heart and have you all bullying me on what I should talk about and what I shouldn't talk about, and like being horrible to me while I'm going through this horrible thing, which like ties into this like anonymity that social media it just is, right? Like the shit people say on social media blows my mind.
It's crazy.
Like, it's nuts. Like I'll post a video where I'll look a certain way and like people will be like, oh shit. Like I've had literal comments be like, you're so hot, I'd bend you over in public and fuck you. Like literally. And I'm like, if you and I met in person, like if we were face to face, would you say that to me? You would just like come up to me like, I'm gonna fuck you. Like you're saying that because you're in the comfort of your fucking home typing this shit, where I'm never going to have to like actually be in your face being like, that's wildly inappropriate. Like, have we forgotten that there are people on the back end of this shit? Like, it's hilarious. And like, of course I fucking laughed about it. I'm like, damn, like this person has gumption, bro. But it's like, when people say shit like what was happening with Elise Myers, like, fuck you for not talking about this thing. And she's like, my baby might die today. Like, can we all remember that like people are behind the screen?
Well, look, the Israel-Palestine thing, it, I think people conflate that somebody has a knowing in one arena and they think they have a knowing in all arenas. And the Israel-Palestine thing is very triggering because there's no right answer. And, I know people really on both sides of that. And I think a discussion is valuable from both sides of it. Both opinions are real and they're valid. And, obviously what happened to kick this thing off is horrible. It's horrible. The response to it, I mean, if in a vacuum, you would think that's how you respond to it, but we're never going to know the whole story because no one knows the whole story.
No. And it's horrible. It's horrible to have something happen to your country and then have everyone defending someone else. And that's what's happening to both cultures right now. And it's devastating and it's horrible. And what Israel is doing to Palestine is egregious and like unthinkable. And yet it's like one of these moments of like, as someone who is studying clinical psychology right now, and we know about epigenetics and we know about the transgenerational process and how trauma lives in our bodies and how everyone's walking around with trauma in their bodies. And all these people are saying things like, kill the Jews or whatever. And it's like, yeah, they're going to have a big trauma response to that because the DNA that happened in their genetics, the DNA that their great grandparents felt is in them. And so when people are saying like, your story isn't real either, like this is all propaganda, like, shame on you. It's like the reaction to people killing Jews is going to be big because trauma
Well,
is big.
and also, the Holocaust wasn't that long ago.
Not even 100 years ago, y'all.
It's not even a blip on the radar, really, of time.
No.
And also, the Palestinians have been living in what a lot of people could consider to be a concentration camp for
100%.
For 50 years. So again, there's no right answer.
No.
There's no right answer.
It's like the epitome of like the hurt people thing. It's like,
and both sides are hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're exactly right. It's like, I think people who can't see the nuance in it need to take a second.
Well, I think it would be really valuable for people like, you or me to have conversations with people from both sides to make them public and not take sides. Look, I was raised Jewish. And while I'm not a practicing Jew, I was raised to believe that Israel is this small little place that's surrounded by countries that would like to see it wiped off the map. And when something like October 7th happens, that's validating that story. That's telling me that that's true. And now what's happened with Iran, trying to, suicide bomb the country. And it is validating the story. And also, look, I understand that it's fucking weird. And I've said this to a number of people. It's really strange that, Jewish people make up like 0.2% of the total population of the globe. There's 16 million Jews in the world, and there's 8 billion people in the world. And when you look at the influence and power that those 16 million people have in the world, that would piss a lot of people off.
100%.
Like, I get that pisses a lot of people off. Like, when you think about banking, you think who runs, and then you think about entertainment and you think about who runs. And then you think about all of these businesses and all of these huge pieces of the world's like what makes the world tick. And this 0.2% of the population has a real big hand in it. That's going to piss some people off.
Totally.
Like, how did that happen?
Totally.
So I get it. Like, envy is real. Yeah. And it's really easy to make people wrong. It's really easy to make groups of people wrong. It just is. And I was raised to make, Arab people wrong. And I had to do some real soul searching to think to myself, well, what if I took a moment and took a ride in their consciousness, in their level of consciousness? What if I decided that I would look at it from their side of the street? Well, when you look at it from their side of the street, they stop being an enemy and they stop being a human, or they start being a human. And I think the only path through is to humanize the people and not make it about a group. When you make it about a group, the right wrong thing is really easy. These are people. These are people with families. These are people that love their bless you. These are people that love their families on both sides of this. And my opinion could piss some people off, and I'm okay with that. But I know people on both sides of this, and it's, you look at how social media amplifies this thing in particular. I just think it's really dangerous.
I agree.
I don't see it changing, but I do think it's dangerous.
I just don't know what the outcome is going to be. And what's happening in Palestine is so horrific. What's happening, it's all just such a mess. And I don't know what the answer is, but what I do know is the answer is being able to sit without reactivity in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I do know that the answer is aid and love and more a deeper understanding. MAPS is doing a lot of work in Israel right now, mm-hmm. and doing ceremony work with mm-hmm. Israelis and Palestinians together. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any statistics in front of me, but what I do know is that the outcome is phenomenal.
Because it's humanizing.
Accurate.
Right.
That's accurate.
Yeah. I mean, when you start working with heart openers, when you start working with MDMA, and other heart openers, you're breaking down that first layer of ego, that first layer of the thought mind, and compassion is sitting right there. It's sitting right behind it.
It's impossible to miss it.
Right. And if you have if you have compassion for yourself, and if you have compassion for the person sitting across from you, it makes it really hard to hate.
Very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't go away once the medicine's over. You
No.
can't unsee what you saw
Yeah.
and felt in your body.
Yeah.
But the stories that have been written and the belief systems that have been architected in order to keep us separate do come tumbling down on that medicine.
Well, because story itself comes tumbling down.
Indeed.
Truth comes through. And, I've always said that if you did want to fix the problem, you would just sprinkle some MDMA or some psilocybin or some LSD or something just all over the area, and you would just see the guns hit the ground, and the bombs, they get turned off. I think.
Yeah.
I think it would be an incredible experiment to see to video it. To make these ceremonies happen, make them to videotape them, and make them available to people, and see the beginning, middle, and end, and see what the integration looks like the tomorrow, the conversation, the conversation before, which is going to be edgy, the during, where it all comes tumbling down, and then tomorrow when you're sitting there telling the person who you were telling you hate that you love them.
Right. Well, it's such a microcosm to the macrocosm, right? Like, we look at our own work, and we're working on loving the parts of ourselves, right? And it's the same thing that happens on these medicines, right? The stories go down, and we go, "Oh, I can see myself for who I really am," and then we integrate that. It's like the studies being done at the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies on veterans with PTSD. If you give a veteran some sort of an SSRI, some sort of a beta blocker, some sort of a fill in the blank medicine, there are no signs of remission. There are signs of a dulling of symptoms, whatever the DSM qualifies as symptoms for PTSD. There's a dulling of symptoms. But after one psychedelic session, MDMA, people, I think it's 63% are in remission, no longer meet the diagnostic statistical manual criteria for PTSD. One session. And it's these studies have been going around for quite some time. Hugo's agreeing. He's barking in the background. He wants to be outside because it's so beautiful. And we wonder why people aren't talking about this. Well, again, it comes back to what's scalable. Giving a drug to somebody one time to heal their PTSD is not very marketable compared to someone being on Zoloft for the rest of their life.
Well, big pharma is corrupt. I mean, it's maybe the most corrupt. But look, there's these conversations are happening now, and they weren't happening 10 years ago. No. And so that means that the tide is turning. Totally. You have people like Paul Stamets out there having the conversation. You have people like, Joe Rogan, Aubrey Marcus. You have people who are you have people who are willing to take the risk to have that conversation. And maybe we get one person to start having another conversation, and one person to start having another conversation. That's the only way. It starts with a conversation. It's not going to happen without you know, us talking to the people as much as we can and creating followings. And you know, when you talk about social media, you create a following for that purpose. Great. That's what we're here for. You know, that's it's our way to spread a message that we maybe couldn't otherwise have.
Mm-hmm. And it's tough because it's such a polarizing topic. Like, you know, the 60s and 70s didn't do us a tremendous favor because so many people did do psychoactive substances, and they weren't really able, with an exception of, you know, people like Ram Dass and Raghu Marcus and, you know, those sort of individuals. It was very much, I think there was a phrase for it, like drop in, drop out, like as in like drop in on medicine and like drop out of school. And so it was tough because the hippies were so far out compared to what it had always been, that people just wrote these compounds off as ineffective. It was just going to make you, it was going to fry. Do you remember the commercials in the 80s too?
This
Like,
is your brain on drugs.
This is your brain on drugs. I mean,
I think there's some truth to that. And also, I think it was a media campaign that was prompted by the government. And, you know, there were books written about, you know, how the government planted, you know, these LSD trials like they did, you know, on Charles Manson, and they got him to go nuts, and then they got to have an ad campaign about how LSD was so bad. And the same thing, you know, with the hippies. I think it was an opportunity for government to kind of set the narrative, which you can't really do today, because when at that time there were 4 television networks. You know, there was ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, or whatever it was. Now there's internet outlets. There's
social media.
There's social media, and you can have these conversations. And when you look at maps, and you look at these podcasters who have millions and millions and millions of people listening. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls I get because of sort of the opinion that I have. And when you look at my life before I started psychedelics, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, because I was going to kill myself, because I had this headache condition, that I was going to die. And I got on the internet, and I started to do a little bit of research, and I came across this guy named Bob Wald, who had this organization called Cluster Busters, which, by the way, you talk about a shit marketing campaign. You call a headache that you know you call it cluster headache. That doesn't really sound all that ominous. Well, let me tell you, it was. And when I started that work, did it take a year or two? Yeah. And then like big wholesale changes and wholesale growth began, and I began to stand for something, and I began to start having a conversation with myself about purpose. Like, what am I doing here? Like, was I really put on this earth to work in a car dealership and to, you know, like to just get money just to have money, just to like take 2 vacations a year? And no. But that doesn't happen unless I begin that exploration that, you know, these are big tools and they're really important, you know, I've done a ceremony every month, at least, since, you know, it's been over 9 years. You know, I met my wife at a ceremony. I met you at a ceremony. I met your mom at a ceremony. I met all of the closest people in my life, other than like people I knew since I was a day or 2 old.
Right.
You know, and I lost a lot of friends, but that's kind of the goal.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me, that was the goal, because I had a lot of toxic people in my life.
Yeah, it's a funny thing when you start looking at goodbyes as a deeply enriching positive experience, because it's so counterintuitive to our biology, right? It's so counterintuitive to like what we're taught culturally and for who we are. I mean, if we are God, the most beautiful red-tailed hawk just flew by. Right? Like if we are tribal beings, right? Like we come from communities where like when you are not a part of the community, you're going to die.
Right.
So that's in our biology. Like, okay, if I'm not a part of this community, this tribe, this town, this whatever, if I'm excommunicated, it's like very Shakespearean, like you are banished, like you are certainly going to die. Right. So when we lose people now by choice, by holding boundaries, whether or not people like them, by lovingly exiting a situation that just no longer aligns with who we really are because people can't meet us and who we are emotionally or physically or spiritually or any of the these, like it's counterintuitive. It feels wrong, but it is so self-honoring.
Well, the one of the ego's big fears is being kicked out of the tribe.
Right.
That's a death. But as you learn, when you start really exploring, death equals a death equals the beginning of a new life. It's the demigods of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and Brahma being the birth of anything, and Vishnu being the existence of that thing. But within the existence of that thing is growth, is existence, is moving into toxicity, which then leads to death, which is Shiva. And my business, a lot of my business as a coach, is to be an agent of Shiva, is to actually go in to kill something, to kill some part of you, some belief that you have, some toxic relationship that you may have, and to help you understand that we're living in evolution, and evolution implies going from less sophisticated to more sophisticated. So if you owned a house and you built this house and the house was built in 1940, and the house has existed for however many years to up to today, and you decide you're gonna tear this house down because it's becoming decrepit, and you build the exact same house that was there in 1940. Well, the house is going to be more sophisticated than it was in 1940. The difference in internet and Wi-Fi and the way
Better
windows,
pipes.
right? The way windows are put in, and the materials that are used, right? And it might not be better, but it is going to be more sophisticated, which is going to serve what you're looking for. Maybe it has a steam shower now. Well, they didn't have steam showers in 1940, So being unattached to the death of something so that you can welcome the new thing is how you get out of your thought mind, how you get out of your ego and into being in your body and experiencing life for what it is.
Burying something and planting something look identical.
And the seed begins its growth in the dark. The growth happens in the dark. And so sometimes what feels dark and scary is actually the seed now beginning to grow.
But it requires trust, right? If we plant that seed and we go, why the fuck isn't it sprouting yet? And we start digging through and we go, oh God, are you sprouting yet? We're going to kill the fucking seed.
Absolutely. And also, when it's like talking to a tree. If you yell at a tree, the tree doesn't grow. But if you sing a beautiful song to the tree thrives. And there's a lot of lessons in gardening with what your life looks like, and your attention is the water for the seed. And so put your attention on what's growing, on what you want to thrive. If you put your attention on toxic shit, the toxic plant grows. And so just be mindful. It's like that was one of the biggest lessons I ever I don't even know how it was probably taught in ceremony, was if you water a toxic plant grows. But if you water a plant that serves and flowers and feeds you and gives you sustenance, that's gonna grow. And faith is the only real thing that you need.
Amen.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I just want to tell you that I love you and thank you for doing this. And obviously, we'll do it again soon. And if you want to find Alexa on Instagram or TikTok, how can people find you?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I love you so much.
I love you too.
You guys can find me at Alexa Silvaggio. It's just ALEXA SILVAGGIO. Love to connect with you.
Yeah, a very unique last name, so you don't have to schmaltz it up at all.
Not at all.
So just go find Alexa